Hello, everyone. We have global audience today. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Revolutionizing sustainability with SAP Green Ledger. Today is a great day to have a live stream on the topic that was officially announced yesterday. My name is Larissa Brinkman from the SAP Global User Groups organization, and I'm your host. Great to have you in our SAP Community YouTube stream today. We have exciting news for you and offer a live stream webcast following the announcement of the SAP Green Ledger. In January, we will offer a deep dive follow-up session, so stay tuned and sign up. Now I will post the registration link in the chat shortly. I'm happy to announce our speakers. We have Stefan Müller, who is Solution Owner for Finance and Risk at SAP. And we have Larissa Limarova, who is Green Ledger Product Marketing Manager at SAP. They will lead us through the session. Before handing over to our speakers, let me share a few housekeeping rules. We kindly ask you to post your questions via live chat, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. To post your question, you need to be signed up with your YouTube or SAP community account. The additional materials of this session, like PDF, will be available under the same link in the description to the video of today's sessions shortly after the stream is finished. With this, have a great time, a great interaction with our speakers, and over to you, Larissa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Larissa Limarova, and I work for SAP Sustainability Business Unit. And I will be sharing this session today with Stefan, who is our finance guru. And the reason for this is SAP Green Ledger, the solution which is the reason for this session today, is really a new product that connects sustainability and finance. It flows between these two. And this is why we will be sharing this session. Before we get into the details, just wanted to mention a usual disclaimer. So obviously, some of the information today that you will be seeing, for example, for the demo, may not have the latest views of the solution because it just went live. Usual disclaimer. And so what do we plan today for you? Stefan will show you a short demo and also get into the details of the whole financial accounting topic. But before we get into these details, I would like to talk a little bit about sustainability overall to set up the scene, so to speak. I hope this may be useful for those in the audience for whom sustainability is not their daily focus. So they perhaps people from finance and they don't know the topic very well. So this is what I will do in the beginning. And so let's get into it, right? First of all, why the need for Green Ledger? Why has SAP decided to invest into a solution for managing sustainability, but targeting financial departments? Isn't it more typical that sustainability in many companies is handled by the dedicated sustainability department? Probably yes, but actually it starts from this, yeah. As a society, we strive to limit climate change, to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade in an effort to preserve this planet for the future generations. And in order to do this, there is one very central standard that regulates understanding of how much greenhouse gas is emitted by certain organization into the environment. And that is called the Greenhouse Protocol. And the GHG protocol categorizes emissions into the atmosphere by Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. And this notion of scopes is important because we will see those scopes 1, 2, and 3 throughout the next hour, and specifically when it comes to the demo. In a nutshell, scope 1 is emissions which we are directly responsible for. For example, if you have an oven in your production process and that oven emits some greenhouse gas that goes into the atmosphere by the chimney, that's a perfect example of the Scope 1 emissions. In contrast, Scope 2 emissions are derived indirectly from the generation of the purchased energy. So when we consume energy, we do not produce emissions ourselves. But electricity provider obviously does produce emissions, for example, by burning the fossil fuels. So we are indirectly responsible because we consume that energy. And finally, Scope 3 are all other emissions. And a big chunk here is actually taken by the products and services which we purchase, for example, to produce our own products. It could be materials or components. So whenever we buy a certain material, again, we are not directly responsible for those emissions generated by manufacturing it. The producer is, right? And by the way, for the producer, those would be Scope 1 emissions. But we are indirectly responsible because we're using it. And if we would not have purchased this material or component, there would be no demand to produce it, right? And obviously less emissions. Scope 3 will also include emissions from the transportations. For example, when we move our final goods to our customers, it will also include the commute of our employees to the plant where we produce our products. Yeah, and then there are also many other more categories, but those are probably the heaviest ones. And again, those scopes you will see in the demo later on, and this is why I'm trying to explain what it is. So this is the intent. We want to minimize climate change by controlling emissions. But what do we see on the right side? We see that many companies and countries even, they announce their goals to reach net zero targets by 2050 or 2030, 2035, depending on the industry. Statistics show today that about 34% of the worldwide major companies, they have their net zero target, which you can see on their websites or you can hear in the news. And they are also measured against those targets. But various indicators are showing us that companies and economies, they're really struggling to keep up with their commitments. Sometimes it's a bit of trying to square the circle. We all want to be good and responsible to fulfill our commitments. And no normal person or a company will ever say in their right mind that they don't really care what happens with the planet. Is there going to be a planet to leave for my children after me, right? But we also need to deal with lots of different things and pressures, like, for example, inflations, recessions, scarcity and growing cost of the raw materials, crises in different ends of the world. In other words, harsh reality very often intrudes on our good intentions. And eventually, only few companies, statistically only 7%, are actually on their way to their net zero target, which of course is a very bad thing, because just in 2020, there were already over 300 billion estimated economic losses due to the climate change and its consequences. It could be flooding, it could be wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes, or something else. And the result of all of this is that what we also see is that the regulators and policymakers, they are really doubling down and gearing up the standards, regulations, laws, and so on relevant to the climate change. So in the last 25 years, we have seen a 20-time increase of global climate change regulations. And we see that about 23% of the global greenhouse gas emissions already today are covered by a carbon price. Like, for example, emissions trading scheme, obviously in Europe, but also in other parts of the world, in China, for example. And it also seems to be happening now in the United States. And this brings sustainability to the office of the Chief Financial Officer. And what you see at the bottom are just few examples of the regulations, which probably will be very hot in 2025. So here, for example, we see very, very dominant in the Europe, CSRD, or corporate sustainability reporting directive. But other regions are also following. For example, in the US, the Security Exchange Commission this year in February also released a new rule to evolve financial climate reporting. Then we also have International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB, for International Finance Reporting Standards, IFRS. Those are global standards, and they are also now setting up regulations which are adopted in certain regions, for example, in China, in Japan, in Singapore. And we are approached by the companies adopting those rules. And also interesting, in the middle, we see CBAM, which stands for the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. And that is basically a system where certain imports of certain materials into certain regions get taxed. The European Union was the front runner with this type of mechanism, but we also see similar taxing mechanisms on imports of certain goods now popping up in other regions of the world, for example, in the US, but also in China. And with that, I think you can already sense compliance topics more often than not actually land on the desk of the Chief Financial Officer. And that essentially leads to a change in responsibilities, but also tasks of finance departments with regards to sustainability. And to illustrate this, to understand how this influences the office of the CFO, I will use an overview from Ernst & Young, which clusters those changing tasks and responsibilities by 4 dimensions: internal versus external pressure to change. And the other dimension is operational versus strategic tasks. You can probably see from here that what I was talking on the previous slide is actually external drivers. But you will see in a moment that everything really is connected. So here, if we start on the bottom left, what typically ends up on the desk of CFO is that they need to make sure that a company is compliant with reporting regulations, like the mentioned CSRD or SAC, or in US or CBAM, right? So the preparation of the data to comply with these regulations is typically a task that ends up in the office of the CFO. And by the way, it's not different in SAP either. This is more operational task coming from external pressure. But there are also some strategic external drivers coming from investor community. Investors are providing funds to business more and more conditional to the ability of the company to prove that the company follows certain sustainability metrics. It might seem far-fetched and only on paper, but they really do this. For example, recently we have talked to a big Asian tobacco company, and they already experienced that. They have already problems attracting the investment into their business because of the sustainability concerns. So this is now also for the CFOs to manage as well, right? And this is a strategic topic, and many companies, actually more and more companies, they see this also as a competitive advantage. If they become more sustainable, they might get easy access to funds, right? So CFO needs now to link sustainability into the existing strategic business strategy and models. And we see this happening. right? And of course, for this, they need new tools because today they typically use tools which only support them with financial views, but more and more they need tools for sustainability related topics, right? And then, of course, if we have a great strategy, it will never be successful if we do not operationalize it, if we do not actually turn it into the action. So then, of course, the Office of CFO need operational tools that will help them with these topics, right? And here we made the full circle and we ended up in the bottom right quadrant. Maybe to make this graph and this discussion a little bit more tangible, let's look at some example. If we zoom on a service company, sorry, I'm still on the previous slide, Stefan, right? So if we zoom on the service company, one of the tasks is obviously to reduce emissions. It's quite logical, right? The travel causes a lot of emissions. So as the owner of the company, you may say, hey, in order to achieve on our emission commitments, let's reduce everybody's travel by 10%. You obviously can do this, but would it be the most effective thing to do? Likely not, right? What would be much more effective is to know exactly who in your company is traveling by air and how much emissions each of your department eventually emits to the environment. In other words, it would be absolutely great and useful to know the emissions on the profit or cost center level, for example. And then you could, on a profit or cost center level again, you could take certain actions. For example, apart from the financial budget, you could also set a CO2 budget or CO2 target. And then if those target budgets for CO2 are exceeded, certain cost centers managers could be punished, for example, by internal payment. They may be asked to fund an internal transformation project, for example, to buy solar panels somewhere, right? And you might say, okay, this is an artificial example, but it is actually a real example that the customer brought to us and asked them to help them with tools to enable something like this, right? So you can see now that things are really changing in that direction. And this is why SAP also is looking at the Office of CFO now. And if we go now to the next slide, Stefan. So over the last few years, SAP has built a whole set of portfolio of such tools to help companies manage their operational and strategic tasks in sustainability. So we provide solutions for the product compliance. We provide solutions for the environment, health, and safety. For responsible design and production, a solution that aims to help producing more environmentally friendly products with less plastics in them. We have solutions to trace the origins of your product on a molecular level if you need it, like green token. And in particular, the solutions which are relevant to today's discussion, so they are marked here on the right in blue. And those are SAP Sustainability Data Exchange. In a nutshell, it provides a network where suppliers can exchange CO2 data, carbon footprint on a common standard with their customers. And then you can really automate the exchange of the carbon footprints across the whole supply chain. Then we have another solution, which is called SAP Sustainability Footprint Management. And that solution helps you to calculate footprints of products you produce. It helps you to calculate footprints of the transportation of those goods, essentially the footprint for the whole life cycle of the product from cradle to grave. You could think about SFM as a central library of footprints, carbon footprints in SAP. And then we have SAP Sustainability Control Tower, which is our solution to collect all sustainability relevant data and prepare it for the internal analytics and also external reporting. And then just yesterday, as we already mentioned, we added one more solution to this great portfolio, which is SAP Green Ledger, with the main purpose of doing carbon accounting. Because for those of you who are in the audience from finance, you will probably understand that all the solutions listed in colored in light blue, they are not really carbon accounting. They are actually carbon counting. Accounting needs to account the emissions to certain units in your organization. Profit centers, cost centers, the business segment, company codes, whatever we use internally to steer our company. We account financials to these dimensions. And with the SAP Green Ledger, we also enable carbon footprints to be accounted to those very same organizational units. This is why at SAP we say that we can move now from carbon counting, what we see today. It may be called carbon accounting, but finance people understand that it's not really accounting. But with Green Ledger, we can really move to carbon accounting. And in a couple of minutes, Stefan will tell you more and show you how it works. Yeah. But before we get there, I would like to answer or maybe anticipate the question that you might ask, and that's the next slide. Why do we need SAP to help customers to become more sustainable? There are so many players out there. So there are big players, small players, niche players, and some of them have been there for quite a while. You probably had the names of Persephone or Hero or Watershed. So what does differentiate SAP from all of them? Well, with SAP, one advantage is that these players don't have is that we can bring sustainability down to the process level. So typically today, all these emissions are calculated in some sitting on the side warehouses or maybe even in Excel spreadsheets. So the data is aggregated on a very average level. We have some complicated formulas that only people who produce them understand. In a nutshell, it's average data, very, very highly aggregated. And what we can bring to the party are business processes. So by bringing the data now into the ERP, we can actually assign the carbon data to business processes. And by that, here you see it in the second box in this diagram, we provide much more precise and actionable sustainability insights. Just think about it. Who in the company today, how many people have access to the data warehouses? Only very few have access and actually understand those Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. But if we bring this into the ERP, we open it to every user in the ERP system, which probably today, practically everyone in our company. So it could be operational decision makers like me today. I'm planning my next business trip. I am booking my travel. Is it going to be by train or is it going to be by the air, and which airline? But we can also then help our strategic decision makers who ask questions like, what is our trend in emissions? How do we plan emissions, right? And we can set up these tasks exactly in the business process. And by that, use trusted actual business process instead of averages in some data house, right? And of course, it also goes beyond compliance. With the niche players today, you can manage your regulatory compliance with probably a very simple use-looking solution to produce your report. Fine. But that doesn't take you the long way. When we think of our four categories of the tasks and activities that we saw earlier, with SAP, you can really go beyond regulatory compliance. You can embed the carbon data and carbon information into strategic and operational decision-making. And eventually, that will provide you with competitive advantage. Because over time, you will not only easily produce reports, but you would actually have better sustainability results. which will give you access to capital, which you today may be struggling to get. Thinking about that example from the tobacco company from Japan. So this is the advantage from SAP. You can go all the way by embedding your carbon data into your ERP system. And then going to the next slide, at SAP, finance is our grassroots. And we like to say, treat carbon like money, because we can now link the sustainability data that we have today in our sustainability footprint manager, that library of carbon footprints that we have today in the sustainability data exchange, the collaboration tool where we can get the information from our suppliers and pass it down to our customers, right? If we get all this data into the ERP system, into our S/4HANA system, we gain several main capabilities. First of all, we will now have in S/4HANA very solid foundation for carbon accounting based on trusted financial processes. So we use what you will see later. We use the finance data, we use the financial process, the financial transactions to now also account or post the carbon. And this is what you see here on the right side next to this nice looking leaf, right? So, and Stefan will show it to you in a minute in the demo system. So we do have a financial posting here for selling a certain finished good. And you can see various accounts here against which it is reported to, right? So, against which it is posted. And now we take this as a template and we mirror that into the sustainability, because that now we can also use the same template to post carbon like we post financial. In other words, we take the financial model as a foundation, and this also enables us to financially quantify carbon account. And with this, we can now see the carbon footprint of our OPEX, right? So we know how much carbon emissions is corresponding to that OPEX. We can do the same with capital expenditures. We know how much emissions did this capital expenditure cost. And these are the things that we can easily get out of the system with this approach we took for the Green Ledger. And eventually, we do this by leveraging the same rigor and trust in the data that we already have in our financial accounting. And if we just think here for a minute, right, why is this so important? Because what we see is a shift from today's limited assurance tomorrow to reasonable assurance. And what it means is that today companies may get away with an Excel file to prepare the data for their carbon reporting, but tomorrow it probably won't be enough, because if we move to the reasonable assurance, with this, it would mean that auditors will go and follow up with these numbers the same way they do today for finance. They will want to understand when we post our emissions report, where the data come from and how did we calculate it. And with SAP Green Ledger, we can provide you a system which makes carbon fully traceable and fully auditable. Like PwC told us, for example, that some companies today, they cannot get the attestation of their non-financial reports because they cannot explain on how these numbers were being calculated. But you will see just in a minute of how Green Ledger can enable the full data trace from where we get the data, for example, from our supplier, to the transactions, for example, our goods receipt, and all the way to the report. And of course, this can be a great foundation for making strategic decisions to set up not only financial plans, but also carbon plans. And with this, I'm passing the torch to Stefan, who will take you deeper into the SAP Green Ledger and will show you how it works in practice. Over to you, Stefan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Larissa, and hello also from my side. And as Larissa just outlined, right? So let's start diving into the exciting topic of Green Ledger and how that does it actually work, and in a minute also how it looks like. First of all, let's have a quick look on how does finance accounting actually work in a nutshell, obviously, right? And how it works since decades. And what you see here is a typical, as said, a bit simplified version of a financial process flow. And on the left side, you see that we have a logistic process and a resulting logistic receipt. That be a goods receipt, for example, if certain products or materials arrives at our plant. And once we post this goods receipt in our S4 system, what automatically happens is you get a financial valuation based on some configured posting logic and based on some configured accounting logic, and accounting in terms who is actually accounted for those values, right? So which profit center, which business segment, right? Which plant, which storage location. So all of these organizational units that we post when we post the goods receipt, the material movement, but also the financial valuation. And that just happens in the background. Eventually, that gets stored in our general ledger, right? For those of you who are familiar with finance, in the famous AC.A table. And at the end of the period, those postings are being consolidated in a consolidation solution like SAP Group Reporting in order to be prepared for the internal, but also obviously predominantly for the external reporting, so that we can make these numbers eventually public. So in a nutshell, this is a financial process flow. And now comes the idea of a green ledger. So we basically take this financial process flow now as an example or as a template now to follow the same logic also for carbon emissions. So what does this mean? Let's first of all start as the logistic document, and next to the quantity or to the quantification of the goods receipt, we now can also set up the CO2 emissions of the goods received. You might wonder, okay, where does the data come from? We will see that later on, or we will touch on that later on also in the demo. But as Larissa earlier said, when she explained or when she outlined the sustainability solutions, we have capabilities like sustainability data exchange or sustainability footprint management, which you could think of a kind of a central footprint inventory in our organization. And from that inventory, we can derive the CO2 numbers, the CO2 quantities for certain materials, which we can now attach to the goods receipt and eventually post that. And now comes the clue. We post that using the same logic as we have in finance. So we post the same profit center, we post the same accounts, we post the same business segment, right? By mirroring the financial valuation. And then again, at the end of the period, then there comes the consolidation task, because not only do we need to consolidate financial numbers, we also need to consolidate carbon numbers, right? When we look at standards like ERS or the CSRD regulations in the European Union, or if we look on the ISSB standard that also was mentioned earlier from IFRS, where we also need to run consolidations, like, for example, we need to consolidate subsidiaries, we need to consolidate investments in order to produce the greenhouse gas protocol that eventually needs to be reported under CSRD, for example. Yeah, and that is then what you see on the very right-hand side. So after consolidating, after preparing the carbon result, also from a group perspective, we can then also use this for internal as well as for external reporting. But be aware, now having it on the same dimensions as finance, right? Because now we have not only structured the CO2 data based on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. In addition, we have also structured it based on profit center, business segment, accounts, OPEX, CAPEX, etc. And this is how we integrate CO2 emission with finance. But a lot of theory, right? So let's walk through a quick demo on how this can look like. with the Green Ledger. And what you see here actually is the starting screen of our S/4HANA public cloud solution, right? And from that public cloud, or from that starting screen, we now open up an application where we manage purchase requisitions. And what you will see now in a minute, once we have opened up the application, that we order here materials called low-density polyethylene, or short plastic. And think of a company now being on a sustainability strategy, having a sustainability business model and producing more sustainable products. And for those sustainable products, demand a premium at the market, right? So the business has a strategy to produce more sustainable products. And the consequence of that can be that now we see here 5 suppliers that actually supply us low-density polyethylene, the material that we need. And what we see here in the screen now is a view on what is actually the expected CO2 footprint from the supplier and what is the expected cost from the supplier. And now the purchaser can make a very conscious decision to say, okay, I rather procure from LKR Recycling, as their price might be higher, so they might have a premium on the price, as you see here, but therefore the CO2 footprint is lower. Why? Well, because they use less virgin plastic and more recycled plastic, and recycled plastic is more expensive when in the processing, hence the bit higher price, but on the other side, the lower CO2 footprint. So that's why we now also decide, right? So we say, okay, let's select LKR Recycling and purchase this. Then at the procurement manager, there is a message popping up saying, hey, here's a new purchase requisition to approve, right? Also the procurement manager can then review basically the purchase requisition and can check the characteristics. You can here, we see the footprint, or we see the price to it, and eventually can approve the purchase requisition, and then we create a purchase order. So now some time goes by, the purchase order is being sent to our supplier, right? And we jump a bit forward in time, and finally now the goods receive at our plant. Now we post the goods received in our S4 system. So we received 3 tons of low density polyethylene, and then we post the goods received, and then the quantity gets adopted in our storage location, in our plant. And in parallel, as said earlier, we also post the financial valuation, right? So that is what you see down here. Linked to this material document, we now also have a financial document assigned. So, and let's have a closer look. Oh, sorry, that was a little bit too far. 1 second, I have to go back. So, and here we see the financial valuation, right? So we see the profit center that was posted to. We see the accounts that were posted. We see the business segment. We don't see the business segment, but the business segment is basically linked to the profit center. So here we see the financial dimensions. So from a financial point of view, nothing special so far. But what we are going to do now is let's go into the Green Ledger and also evaluate this goods received now with CO2. And as earlier said, first of all, we need to know what is now the CO2 footprint of this material that we just received. Or in Green Ledger terms, we say we need to have a carbon collection document. And that is what we now do, create, and by uploading the data from Sustainability Footprint Management, so our central inventory database. And now the system proposes us, hey, post this to this profit center, post it to this account. Down here we see the physical quantity of the goods received, and up here we see the CO2 amount. And these organizational units are derived from the earlier posted financial valuation of the goods received. You remember that was basically the profit center, that is the assigned business warehouse, and that is the account. So, and that's what we are also going to do now, right? We say, okay, looks all good. Let's post this. And now here we have created the Green Ledger journal entry. Following the same logic, double bookkeeping, right? Debit and credit. We also have the financial qualities in this journal entry, right? So we have a user who created that. We have a posting date, and if you want to change a value in here, like not like you could potentially do it in a data warehouse, or if you could potentially do it even in Excel, just go in and change this. No, this is not possible here. You really have to cancel, reverse the document and repost it again in case you want to make a correction to keep the data trace, to keep the consistency and the audit alive, right? So, and now we have CO2 and finance numbers on the same dimensions, on accounts, on profit centers. Hence, we can report them in combination. And this is an example here in our SAP Analytics Cloud solution, where we now here created a dashboard, where we created, for example, a graphic in the middle, where we see the operating income in relation to our carbon emissions. Or on top here, we can calculate, or we can easily calculate carbon intensities, like, for example, the CO2 emission of a euro revenue. Or at the bottom here, where we have a profit and loss statement, as we now have CO2 based on accounts, and lines in a profit and loss statement are nothing more than hierarchy of accounts. We can easily roll up, for example, what is the CO2 emission of my OPEX? What is the CO2 emission of my CAPEX? And we can even see that, for example, per business segment. What is the CO2 footprint of all my CAPEX in business segment hardware compared to business segment software, for example, right? So we can really compare them and analyze them using the same dimensions that we also have for finance. But that was the actual side, right? So this was a lot on how we can now actually post the CO2 emissions. But especially when you look at the tasks and responsibilities of a CFO, or of an office of the CFO that Larissa earlier outlined, we also said, hey, it's also about the strategy, the planning, the forecasting of data that we now need to look into. And actually, that's also something we enable now with our financial planning solution. So again, we are here in SAP Analytics Cloud, and this is the business content, the standard business content for integrated financial business planning. And what you see here on the right-hand side, we now also have a greenhouse gas category. So let's also have a view on now what we can do on the planning side. And first of all, what you see here, we have here several functions, right? Like, for example, raw material factors, raw material CO2e, cost center, spend base, cost center, activity base. I won't go through all of them, but I will at least show you some highlights of how we can plan CO2 now in conjunction with finance, and start with the raw material factors. So here we now see a list of all our raw materials and the planned factors in the various periods going forward, right? So now we are not on the low density polyethylene side. So now here we have different products like a frame or a seat or wheels. Apparently we produce a bicycle here. And then for these materials, you see here the scope 3.1, scope 3.4. And now we can enter here, or we can change here the planned CO2 factor, right? And that's to change that would be quite easy. So we could go in and would say, we plan that for the handlebars, right? In February onwards, we will have a higher footprint, and we simply add it here. That's the first part. Now comes the second part. Let's go into the spend-based planning. And therefore, we look at the cost center, like here, IT infrastructure, and here we have travel expenses, airfare, right? Coming back again to the example Larissa made earlier. So let's plan our travel, our airfare travel emissions. But now we do this not based on an emission factor. Now we do the spend based. We say, hey, per euro spent on air travel, we plan a certain CO2 factor. Yeah, and this is what you see here. So per euro spent, or per dollar, or whatever spent, we now plan with 2.5 kilogram of CO2. And I think you can already see where this leads to, right? Because if we now go to the financial planning, again, we go to our cost center, IT infrastructure cycle. We open up the account for the airfare. Right, here we go. And we see here that we have roughly planned 68,195 US dollar in airfare spent, multiplied by the 2.5. So hence we plan for roughly 170K kilogram of CO2. Yeah, simply by taking the financially planned spend, and based on that, now also plan the CO2 emissions. Yeah. And the clue is here, right, that of course we not only do this for the spend base, right? I mean, as we entered earlier, the raw material factors, of course, we can now multiply those raw material factor with the planned amount of raw material that we need based on the integrated financial business plan. Okay, that was a complicated sentence. So that means the same data foundation that we use for our financial planning, right? How much material do we need? How much do we sell of a certain product that we have, right? How much OPEX, how much CAPEX do we plan going forward? So basically we use the same data foundation, not only to forecast the financials, but now also forecast the emissions on the same data structure. And that eventually can also then lead us to, right, a planned CO2 statement. So here we see a scope 1, we see a scope 3. I mean, this video was taken from a demo system, so the values are not do not make 100% sense, right? But I think you get the point. So now we can say, hey, take the data that we earlier planned on the cost center, on the raw material factors, extrapolate this up, and this is then the anticipated CO2 statement in the periods to come. But not only can we produce a CO2 statement for the periods to come, of course, we can now also bring this in correlation with the planned financial figures. For example, we can look on a financial statement in combination of CO2 and financial figures. So we can say, hey, what is my planned revenue intensity for next year? What is my planned CO2 for my OPEX? What is my planned CO2 for my CAPEX? And then again, drill this down into the organizational unit for profit center A, for profit center B, for business segment hardware, for business segment software. And yeah, that was a quick glimpse into what the Green Ledger is and what does it actually enable. To summarize basically what you saw, or to quickly recap. So we went through the various steps. So we collect the data from SFM in sustainability footprint management. We can also validate the data. Then we mapped the emission data to the materials, like for example, low density polyethylene. So we took the data from our suppliers. We mapped it against our own material codes. I jumped that in the demo, but we can also do some additional calculations, right? So not only can we say, hey, what is my 3.1 footprint, so the footprint of the materials, I can also say, hey, what is my anticipated transportation emission, right? And so I can also calculate in tools like sustainable footprint management, the footprint of the transportation, and can equally post that, like I just shown you the demo for scope 3.1. Then we can go to the carbon accounting, where we account the data into the financial data. The carbon consolidation, as I earlier said, we can then move the data into solutions like SAP Group Reporting to consolidate, and then eventually do some reporting and analytics. And below, you see then the solutions where we can do that. As said, sustainability footprint management, sustainable data exchange for the collection, validation, mapping, and calculation. The accounting as such with the Green Ledger. The consolidation, as I mentioned earlier, with subgroup reporting. And then the reporting analytics with SSC or Sustainability Control Tower, which then prepares the data eventually for the publication for the report as such. Also, I think interesting to know that we know that carbon accounting might load additional effort on existing finance departments, right? And we hear this from many customers that with the anyway short capacity, now there's also the burden of carbon accounting. Hence, we have the topic in full focus on making this process as efficient as possible, and to have AI as a supporting tool to carbon accountants, like, for example, in the AI emission factor mapping to materials. What we also plan for to release next year is when invoices arrive, like utility invoices, right? That we use AI to prepare them also for the carbon posting. That we do reporting or analytic support using of AI, like forecast predictions, or with a tool that we call in SAP Analytics Cloud called Just Ask, that we provide a very easily consumable way to analyze and to browse through the data. So, nutshell, we look in all process steps where we can embed AI, where we can provide AI services that are of assistance to the carbon accounts. A quick architectural overview. So how do these tools that I just shown you eventually play together, right? As you've seen down here, we have the S/4HANA public cloud that you also saw in the demo, or the private cloud as well. Then next to it, on the business technology platform, we have the solution of the Green Ledger, where we created these carbon collection documents and eventually triggered the postings. It got the data from sustainable footprint management. Then we can load the financial data and the CO2 data into SAP DataSphere, and then use the SAP Analytics Cloud for planning, but also for analytics, as we also just saw in the demo. And what we did not show in the demo, but where we mentioned it a couple of times, of course, you can then also bring the data, for example, into group reporting or into sustainability control tower next year, in order to report it or to prepare it for the external reports. What are the main business values we see with this? First of all, is access to insight. And I think also this was already mentioned earlier. I mean, we make the sustainability data available to decision makers, operational as well as strategic decision makers, as typically the data is in some data warehouses, in some Excel files, etc., right? And when you need to make a business decision, like from which supplier do I now source the material, do you look in these Excel files? Do you look in these data warehouses? Of course you could, but do you actually do that? What we provide is the data at the point where the decision is being taken, like, for example, like we saw in the demo. So we make the data available to potentially all ERP users and to operations as well as strategic decision makers, which will eventually, of course, help to transform the business, because we can really make more sustainability sound decisions, because we have the financial and the sustainability impact available at the point in decision, which can eventually lead to better business decisions, hence craft a competitive advantage, hence fulfill on the business strategy that we defined or that we created. And the third main business value, also mentioned earlier, is especially when we look at the regulatory anticipated developments that we see with a shift from today's limited to tomorrow's reasonable assurance. We all believe the audits of sustainability reports will become stricter and more granular. And with the solution of the SAP Green Ledger and with the reusing the financial qualities and controls, we also believe we will make audits much more efficient, as we will have a clear data trace and a data lineage from a report, an external report, where we say, this is our scope 3.1. And if somebody comes around and says, hey, how did you actually calculate the scope 3.1? We can link them to the goods received that we actually had in a certain period, and including the associated CO2 footprint. We can even see where we retrieved this footprint from, sustainability footprint management, to answer the question on how we could actually calculate this 3.1 number, in a clear, auditable, and traceable way. So this is our third main advantage that we see. Yeah, and with that, we are basically at the end of the presentation. So what are the main key takeaways? Quickly going over with SAP Green Ledger, or generally with SAP solutions, we embark on the journey of ERP-centric sustainability based on financial principles. Yeah. To move from compliance over to transformation. Of course, compliance is super important, especially in 2025. But if we really want to make a difference, if we really want to make a change, if we really want to craft a competitive advantage, not only in 2025, but for the years to come, we need to start thinking into how to transform better. Again, taking this example from Larissa, where a customer already approached us from the tobacco industry saying, it's getting hard, more and more difficult in order to get money from investors. So we really need to show them that we are making progress on sustainability aspects. And last but not least, start now with the Green Ledger. I mean, as said, the Green Ledger is generally available since yesterday, but the Green Ledger is, from how we see it, the gold standard. I mean, what is required before we can even go to the Green Ledger, that the data is available. The data is available, emission data is available in good quality, because only if we get good quality data from our suppliers, right, it makes sense to actually also post them, to post them against profit centers, right? If you have bad data, the outcome, the result of that is also not of best quality. So that's why start today. Get your data structure, get your data quality in order, and then this makes the transition towards the Green Ledger much more easy at a later point in time. And yeah, with that, I think we are at the end of our presentation. And Larissa, back over to you.
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you, Larissa. Thank you, Stefan, for this insightful session. To the audience, I've already posted a link in the chat for a more deep dive session. You can register right from the chat. If you can't see the chat, then we will post the PDF in the description to this video shortly after the stream is finished. But let us look at the Q&A, and this is now the official start of Q&A. And we have a couple of questions in the chat, and I would like to start with the first one. Will Green Ledger offer the possibility to record the 7 different GHGs covered by GHG protocol, CO2, CH4, N2O, HFC, PFC, SF6, and F3? Now I've heard all of them as if they were currencies or only in terms of CO2 equivalents.
I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure if I fully got the question, but yes, I mean, with the Green Ledger, first of all, you can account for the full greenhouse gas protocol, right? As this is also the ambition, the clear ambition to create a CO2 statement out of the Green Ledger. Hence, we need to cover for all greenhouse gas scopes. And with the Green Ledger, you can also post all greenhouse gas scopes. So that is the first answer. I'm not sure, Larissa, I didn't get these abbreviations. If that answered the question, let me know if I missed something.
The question goes to, I hope that the Leticia who have posted this question is like your answer. If not, please put your comments in the chat so we can elaborate on it a little bit more. The second question goes to Stefan. It says, Stefan said that the carbon accounting from Green Ledger can be consolidated in S4GR. Is this in line with GHG protocol consolidation approaches, equity, share, or operational control?
Yes, yeah, exactly right. So in our SAP group reporting solution, you can set up based on the same master data, so based on the same organizational structures, two different rule sets. One, for example, for operational control, and the second one more for the equity control. So you can then have for the financial numbers based on IFRS, you can then use the equity control, and for the same company codes, for the same org structures, you can then also run a second rule set for the non-financials, like for the carbon emissions, on operational control. You can even have those be executed at different point in times and being run by different people, right? If the financial numbers come at day number 2, while non-financials come at day number 15, but the group reporting solution as such offers you the tools to run both on the same org units having different shares. Yeah, that's possible. And you can include non-financials into group reporting using group reporting data collection toolset that allows you to import the carbon emissions also, for example, from a Green Ledger. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. And I just received a notification from the author of this post that thanks, Stefan, for the second question. The answer is clear. So obviously it's fine. I look at the time. We are at the end of our planned time, but if you have questions, now is the moment to post them. So we will be happy to answer them live. If there is no more questions, then as I've already said, please stay tuned and sign up for the question that we have for the session that we plan in January. I've posted the link in the chat, so you can do it directly from the chat. So let me see the question. One more question arrived. The SAP Green Ledger is applicable only for financial aspects and SAP S/4HANA Cloud application, ? Or it will be generated for other sectors and SAP application?
Yeah, maybe I can take that, right? So, so the SAP Green Ledger is indeed a solution that works with the S/4HANA, right? So a row and a CRIS as a commercial prerequisite, but it basically works with the S/4HANA cloud solutions in combination with the financials of S/4HANA, right? Because we do need the accounts, we do need the posting logic, we need the posting configuration of an S/4HANA cloud system in order to mirror that now into carbon accounting. It is not planned to use the Green Ledger now for other applications within SAP, simply because it extends the financial configuration of an S4. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. I hope this answers the question. And I can't see more questions in the chat, but maybe one more question that we collected in advance, and especially I think it's especially valuable to the audience. You mentioned several new features that will be coming soon, and the question is where can we see, or where can the audience check what is actually planned?
Yeah, I can take this. So obviously Green Ledger is in first release. So we have a huge roadmap for the future functionalities to come to augment it, including the AI features that Stefan showed. You can find the roadmap of the solution in the SAP official SAP Roadmap Explorer. Green Ledger is already there. You just search for this solution and you will see the whole roadmap until I think 2026 or something like that. So yeah, SAP Roadmap Explorer, the right place to find what is coming with SAP Green Ledger.
Excellent, thank you for that. So, yeah, to the last question, thanks a lot for your clarification. Obviously, the answer was clear. With this, we are already a bit over the time, but I can't see more questions in the chat. Again, I would like to thank you, our speakers. Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Larissa, for giving us these insights on SAP Green Ledger. And also thank you very much to our audience for being with us, for being active, bringing up questions. And please stay tuned, sign up for the session that we will offer in January. And let us interact and get more into details on the SAP Green Ledger. With this, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wish you great holiday season and see you in January. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.